Today is Saturday, April
This talk was given
19th,
by Roshi Rafe Martin,
2025.
guiding teacher of the Endless Path
We'll
Zendo,
continue on
a
where
lay
we
Buddhist
left
community
off,
in Rochester, New
looking
York.
through
Join our practice
chapters
in
of
person
what may
or
be a new
online
book.
at
We shall
endlesspathzendo.org.
see. I've rearranged the order completely. I've trimmed it further. I've rewritten sections, but we'll march on from essentially where we left off. I'll put in what's now the second chapter where we left it off. I think it was at the seventh or eighth. So we'll just continue in that line. But here's a little interesting story. By the way, the koan, we'll work on a koan today, which is a koan of the Buddha, which is why I've decided to put it at the beginning of the book rather than towards the end. It's the world honored one ascends the teaching seat, and that's in case 92 of the Blue Cliff record. But here's an interesting thing. I don't know if anyone here is responsible for this mystery. If you are, please speak up and let me know it was you. But I've been working with the guy next door to replace some of our fencing, which has gotten pretty old in our yard and needed to be replaced. Yesterday, or 2 days ago, I was out there with him doing some finishing up stuff, and I looked in this, it's a bush that's rather tree-like by the left side of the yard as you're facing into the yard where the new fencing is. There's this big bush, it's black limbs spreading out from a central point. Very solid, it's tree-like. And right in the center where the branches all spread out from, what I found was a black wooden Buddha about this high standing in there. Now, the only people who have been in that yard or even know what's in there, there's a couple of stone Buddhas we have there, is either people from the Zendo, some old friends who haven't been around in person since the winter, before the winter started, and this guy next door who knew nothing about it. So oddly, this black standing wooden Buddha is still standing in that tree bush out in the yard. Now, if anybody connected with the Zendo has snuck in and put it there, please let me know now. Otherwise, the mystery will continue. I have no idea how it got there. I checked with Rose before she left for sesshin. She's never seen it before. She had no idea it was even there. So a Buddha has mysteriously appeared in this bush in our backyard. It's kind of strange. But our koan today is about the Buddha sitting and then leaving. So it seems appropriate to use that as our introduction. So in this Teisho, we'll look at the Buddha as awakened, realized, wise, and skillful. And we'll see how he taught others. It's a very brief koan. And in it, the Buddha's cosmic realization, born of the rarefied air of India, is transformed by the Zen eye of China into something quite down to earth. So case 92, Blue Cliff record, or Hekigan-roku in Japanese, goes like this. One day, the world-honored one took his seat on the platform. You know, the teaching platform would be a raised platform. Like you see often a Buddha will be, like a figure of a Buddha will be on some kind of stand or platform, not just flat on the earth. So one day, the Buddha took a seat on the platform. Manjushri, that's the Bodhisattva of wisdom, struck the table with the gavel, bam, and said, clearly understand the Dharma of the King of the Dharma. The Dharma of the King of Dharma is like this. The world-honored one descended from his seat. That's the entire case. One day the world-honored one took his seat on the platform. Manjushri struck the table with the gavel and said, clearly understand the Dharma of the King of the Dharma. The Dharma of the King of the Dharma is like this. The world-honored one descended from his seat. That's the entire case. Brief as it is, this koan has its challenges. What is Manjushri, Bodhisattva of wisdom, teacher of the past 7 Buddhas, even talking about? What is the Dharma King's Dharma? And why is Manjushri, Bodhisattva of wisdom, doing the talking? When the world honored one, the Buddha himself is right there. Further, why does the Buddha remain silent and then simply descend from the teaching seat? Finally, why was this even included in the Blue Cliff Record, as if it were so wonderful? A quote from Wumen's commentary on Case 6 of the Gateless Barrier. The Buddha holds up a flower. In that commentary, Master Wumen, the compiler of the Cases, commentaries, and verses of the Gateless Barrier, says, Golden-faced Gautama, that is the Buddha, is certainly outrageous. He turns the noble into the lowly, sells dog flesh advertised as mutton as if it were so wonderful. In short, his tongue-in-cheek point is, what's so wonderful about this trivial act of holding up a flower instead of giving a Dharma talk? Yet, at least in that incident, the Buddha actually did something, minimal as it was. He held up a flower. Additionally, he offered words of praise for Mahakashapa, the one person in the assembly who got the point. But in our present case, Manjushri says a few words, and then the Buddha simply ups and leaves, which doesn't even qualify as dog's flesh, advertised as mutton, but it's a kind of nothing burger. Then again, nothing can be something. In a recording by the great jazz surrealist stoned storyteller of the late 1950s, mid-60s, Lord Buckley, he does a powerful riff on the Spanish conquistador Cabeza de Vaca, who, after being shipwrecked on the coast of Texas in 1529, lost everything, even himself. Yet through that great and total loss, he gained an ability to be a healer and actually served in that sacred role among the indigenous peoples of the Southwest. But he again lost this remarkable healing power once he was himself again and had returned to Spain. At a climactic moment in his retelling of this remarkable true tale, Lord Buckley quietly says, to have nothing, you must have, and then, giving it his all, he simply screams, nothing! And in that instant, all, including ourselves, the listeners, really are gone. We start with the nothing this koan offers, which opens into a question or a series of questions. What is the Dharma of the Dharma King? Why is Manjushri its spokesperson? Why does the Buddha get up and leave? He's hardly even arrived, or so it seems, before he's already heading off. Is he miffed? Did he have a previous appointment? Was he signaling approval or disapproval? What kind of Dharma is this? When Emperor Wu failed to grasp Bodhidharma's teaching of vast emptiness, nothing to be called holy, Bodhidharma, first ancestor of Zen in China, ninth in succession from the Buddha, did something similar. He didn't stick around to explain further, but walked away, which was at least a response to the emperor's lack of insight. Here, Manjushri and the Buddha understand one another quite well. Yet, the Buddha descends from the teaching seat and leaves. What did those who'd come to hear his Dharma think? Though they're not mentioned, surely they were there. After all, Manjushri is talking to someone when he announces the Dharma of the Dharma King is like this. Had the Buddha and Manjushri planned this? Was Manjushri the only one capable of understanding? Yamada Roshi, that was Aiken Roshi's final teacher after Yasutani Roshi, and was his transmission teacher, offers some useful words on Manjushri. And this is from unpublished talks he gave on the Blue Cliff Record. So here's some background on Manjushri. Manjushri, get this, was a Buddha who returned to the rank of Bodhisattva to save others. Manjushri is furthermore known as the teacher of the 7 Buddhas, those Buddhas of the past whose ranks include Shakyamuni. Given how time is essentially without beginning and end, it is not unreasonable to assume that countless individuals practicing from the beginningless past have gone on to become Buddhas. In fact, it is said in Buddhist tradition that they are as numerous as the sands of the Ganges River, in a word, numberless. As was mentioned, the Bodhisattva Manjushri is teacher to those numberless Buddhas. Manjushri is also a symbol of enlightenment. To become a Buddha, it is necessary to pass through the stage of Bodhisattva, and this means having attained enlightenment. Since there is no one who has attained Buddhahood without attaining enlightenment, it is for this reason that Manjushri, the symbol of enlightenment, is the teacher to all the Buddhas. In other words, this is symbolic language. Without experiencing emptiness, you can never really know form. Without the self falling away completely in realization of intimacy or enlightenment, how can you be a Buddha? Though he takes the form of a bodhisattva, that is, Manjushri does, he differs not at all from an actual Buddha when it comes to the depth of his realization. Thus, whatever he says will be perfectly fitting for anything which Shakyamuni Buddha says. And of course, the patron saint, so to speak, of Zendo is Manjushri. In Japan, there's no Buddha in the Zendo. The Buddha is in the Buddha hall, where chanting, services, maybe teisho are given. But in the Zendo, where we practice, there's only Manjushri, sometimes on a lion, sometimes holding a sword, act of cutting through all our delusive thoughts. This is the mind of practice realization itself. This is Manjushri. If you were at the Toronto Zen Center, either by Zoom or in person, they have their Zendo set up that way as well. There's a Manjushri on a pillar in the center of the Zendo. That's very traditional for Japanese Zendos. So that's Manjushri. Now, there's another well-known Zen incident that seems even closer. This is about Fudaishi, an enlightened layman in China, some 1,000 years after the Buddha. He also left without saying a word. So this is the story, and it becomes part of Koan Case 67 of the Blue Cliff Record. Fudaishi, born in 497, was one of the most extraordinary figures in Buddhism and an important precursor of the school of Zen. Supposedly, Bodhidharma didn't arrive till a bit after that, so there was no formal Zen, but this guy really had something and was sharp. Once he was invited by Emperor Wu of Liang, who reigned from 502 to 549, and this would have been the emperor who didn't understand Bodhidharma. He was invited by the emperor to give a lecture on the Diamond Sutra. No sooner had he ascended to the platform, like the Buddha, he ascended to the platform. Then he rapped the table with his rod and descended. The poor emperor was simply lost in amazement. That was his teisho on the Diamond Sutra. This is from John Woo's book, The Golden Age of Zen. The koan 67 of the Blue Cliff Record continues the story, adding that when the emperor said he didn't understand, he's asked by Master Chi, who was there, "Do you understand?" In other words, what Fudaishi has just done. The emperor said he didn't understand. Then Master Chi said, "The great Bodhisattva has expounded the sutra thoroughly." And there you have it. The Diamond Sutra says, like a cloud, a drop of dew, a dream, a fantasy, a flash of lightning, so should we regard all things. And that is exactly what the layman Fu so tellingly expounds. Like a flash of lightning. Fully here and then gone. It seems almost identical to the actions of the Buddha in our current case, but is it? Case 25 of the Blue Cliff Record, the master of Lotus Flower Peak holds up his staff, that's its title, may offer illumination on the fundamental point, revealing of something of why the incident with Fudaishi may not be such a perfect match. The talking heads, unbeknownst to themselves, touched on this very point in their song Heaven, in the performance film and album Stop Making Sense, back in 1984. If you don't know that performance recording, I recommend it highly. It's a movie that Jonathan Demme did of the Talking Heads, and it's one of the really greatest concert films ever done. And it's intimate, quite. So the song Heaven opens like this. Everyone is trying to get to the bar. The name of the bar is called Heaven. The band in Heaven, they play my favorite song. Play it one more time. Play it all night long. Heaven is a place where nothing ever happens. Heaven is the place, a place where nothing ever happens. In any case, here's the koan. The master of Lotus Flower Peak held up his staff and showed it to his disciples, saying, when the ancients got here, why didn't they remain? There was no answer from the assembly, so he answered for them. Because it is of no use in everyday life. And again he asked, what will you do with it? And again he himself answered in their place, taking no heed of others. I place my staff across my shoulders. I go straight ahead, deep into the recesses of the myriad peaks. The master of Lotus Flower Peak held up his staff and showed it to his disciples, saying, when the ancients got here, why didn't they remain? There was no answer from the assembly. So he answered for them, because it is of no use in everyday life. And again he asked, what will you do with it? And again he himself answered in their place, taking no heed of others. I place my staff across my shoulders. I go straight ahead, deep into the recesses of the myriad peaks. After enlightenment, the Buddha had sat completely at ease, completely realized beneath the Bodhi Tree, absorbed, fully gone into the overwhelming presence of the unfiltered, awakened moment, vast, completely empty of any self-centeredness whatsoever, as Bodhidharma said to the emperor when questioned as to the highest teaching. Yet Shakyamuni's former ascetic disciples, the 5 men who followed him through his period of austerities, were waiting, as was the suffering world, to know of a path that opened beyond habitual self-centeredness, beyond what traditional Buddhism calls samsara, beyond delusion and suffering. The still-seated, newly realized Buddha got up and set off from beneath the Bodhi tree to open that gateless gate, going straight ahead, deep into the recesses of the myriad peaks and myriad valleys, letting what had been fully and entirely go, the world of the 10 directions, his entire body. Why didn't he remain? What was the fundamental point? What indeed will you do with it? What will you do with it? Setting out on literal pilgrimage can help us establish a deeply rooted faith in the Buddha way, which literally began 2,500 years ago when the Awakened Buddha Shakyamuni stood up from his great awakening beneath the Bodhi tree and set off along the dusty roads to teach. Pilgrimage to the sites of the historic Buddha's life has been a traditional practice ever since. But While Zen teachers enthusiastically encourage it, they also remind us that our real pilgrimage is the journey to realization of our original mind. And while this mind is never at all distant, waking to its reality will require effort, real work. If we mean to realize original Buddha nature, we'll have to sit down, steady our jumpy minds, and search into the nature of this very self. The Buddha Shakyamuni's own complete awakening was the foundation of his teaching. That same realization, which to one degree or another is accessible to each of us because it is already who we are, remains the core of the Buddha way for Zen practitioners today. Case 15 of the gateless barrier, Dung Shun, came to study with Yun Men. And Yun Men asked him, "Where have you come from?" And the case goes like this. Dung Shun said, "From Chao Tu." Yun Men asked, where were you during the summer training period? Dung Shun said, "I was at Potsu Monastery in Hunan." Yun Men asked, "When did you leave there?" Dung Shun said, "On the 25th of August." Yun Men said, "I spare you 60 blows." The next day, Dung Shun came again to Yun Men and asked, "Yesterday, you said you spared me 60 blows. I don't know where I was at fault." Yun Men said, "You rice bag. Why do you wander from west of the river to south of the lake?" With this, Dung Shun had great satori. He gave all the correct answers. Yeah, I was at Harvard for the summer program. That was my credential. I left there when? Oh, yeah, when that ended, the end of August, and I spare you 60 blows. All night, he struggled in a sea of yes and no, right and wrong. He didn't understand. The next day he went back to the teacher, Yun Men, and said, "You spared me 60 blows. That's a terrible insult. You're not even worth 60 blows," which would have been criticism indeed. "You're not even worth it." "But I don't know. Where was I at fault? I gave all the accurate answers." "You rice bag." That's a terrible expression. Rice bag means you're only practicing because it's a way to get fed and have a roof over your head. You have no aspiration whatsoever. You just fill yourself up like a bag of rice. Why do you wander from west of the river to south of the lake? With this, Dung Shun had a great satori. West of the river, south of the lake, refers to the pilgrimage of Zen monks of Tong-era China, the golden age of Zen. They were going from Matsu to Shirdo, the two noted teachers of their time. But what about here? What about now? What about our own pilgrimage to that? Rabbi Hillel's dictum, "If not for myself, who will be for me? But if I'm only for myself, what am I? And if not now, when?" If not now, when? When does our restlessness cease? Where does it cease? When does all our uneasy, anxious seeking, our internal and external wandering, come to an end so that we find? When do we see where and what we already are? How often, even in a sesshin we've looked forward to and prepared for, might we find ourselves wishing it were simply over? Or how many times in a single round of zazen may we find ourselves wandering on our mind to things long gone, things yet to be, things that never were or that never will be? Go ask Alice. She knew about jam yesterday and jam tomorrow, but no jam today. The word samsara is Sanskrit, and it literally means wandering. It is our own daily world as perceived, created, experienced by a wandering, confused, unfocused, self-oriented mind. What world might we experience with a focused, selflessly aware mind, or with no mind? What world would we live in? What world would we hear and see? Wikipedia, which has its moments, tells us that samsara is a Sanskrit word that means wandering as well as world, wherein the term connotes cyclic change, or less formally, running around in circles. Samsara is referred to with terms or phrases such as transmigration, reincarnation, karmic cycle, and cycle of aimless drifting, wandering, or mundane existence. Yet Buddhism says that samsara is nirvana. How does Zen tradition see this? Case 20 of the Book of Serenity, the Shoyo Roku, offers this. Jizo, in Chinese would be Tizang or Lohan, asked Fai Yan, in Japanese that would be Hogen, "What are you up to these days?" Hogen said, "I am wandering at random." Some translations for this read, "I'm wandering on pilgrimage." Jizo said, "What do you expect from wandering? Or what do you expect from your pilgrimage?" Hogen said, "I don't know." Jizo said, "Not knowing is most intimate." Hogen was suddenly enlightened. Jizo asked Hogen, or Jizo asked Fai Yan. It would be Jizo asked Hogen would be the Japanese. "What are you up to these days?" Hogen said, "I'm wandering at random." Jizo said, "What do you expect from wandering or wandering on pilgrimage?" "I don't know." Jizo said, "Not knowing is most intimate." Hogen was suddenly enlightened. Not knowing is not a reference to Homer Simpson's ubiquitous duh. W.B. Yeats wrote a poem entitled The Dawn, in which he says, "I would be ignorant as the dawn, that has looked down on that old queen measuring a town with the pin of a brooch, or on the withered men that saw from their pedantic Babylon the careless planets in their courses, the stars fade out where the moon comes, and took their tablets and did sums. I would be ignorant as the dawn that merely stood, rocking the glittering coach above the cloudy shoulders of the horses. I would be, for no knowledge is worth a straw, ignorant and wanton as the dawn. I would be, for no knowledge is worth a straw, ignorant and wanton as the dawn." Practice realization, which means the moment-by-moment work of giving attention again and again to this count, this breath, this inquiry, this koan, is our way of dropping, releasing, letting go, seeing through, and not simply suppressing or trying to evade what Bob Dylan, in Tombstone Blues, agreeing with Yeats, calls our useless and pointless knowledge. Our useless and pointless knowledge. What is this cup, this flower, this star, this tree, this river, this person, when freed from our own long accumulated and encrusted securities, all our so-called knowledge about it? How marvelous, even profound, each speck of dust might actually be. Not knowing is most intimate. Intimacy being another traditional word for realization or enlightenment. One of William Blake's astonishingly clear insights emerging even as the dark cloud of industrialization and its foul, satanic mills was spreading across England goes like this. To see a world in a grain of sand, and a heaven in a wildflower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand, and eternity in an hour. That's from his Auguries of Innocence, to see a world in a grain of sand, and a heaven in a wild flower. Hold infinity in the palm of your hand, and eternity in an hour. This is intimacy indeed. Blake knew about being gone, empty of self-centeredness, void. This is form is only emptiness. Emptiness only form. But Blake wrote about it like this. He wrote, eternity is in love with the productions of time. Master Wu Men, in his commentary to Case 9 of the Gateless Barrier, the Buddha of Great Penetration and Perfect Wisdom, says, I approve the old barbarian's realization, but I don't approve his understanding. If an ordinary person realizes he or she is a sage, if a sage understands, he or she is an ordinary person. He's telling us not to cling to our pointless, useless knowledge. If we don't, what is there then? What does a sage realize? What does an ordinary person understand? What is the essence of it? Now, none of this is to disparage literal pilgrimage, going to sites where the Buddha lived and taught, or where Zen ancestors lived and practiced, deepens faith, arouses gratitude, encourages more complete personal efforts. Awareness of power spots is universal and extends far back and back into human history, as the carved and painted Paleolithic caves of Altamira, Lascaux, Chauvet, as well as those of Indonesia and Australia, among countless other sites, attest. Human beings have long known the benefits of aligning ourselves with certain places. But in addition to all literal pilgrimage, we also realize, as Joseph Campbell noted, that a fundamental pilgrimage shapes the contours of our lives into a hero and heroine's journey. Consciously lived, our own life itself, just as it is, can be a pilgrimage from ignorance to wisdom, self-centeredness to compassion, selfishness to selflessness, immaturity to maturity. All literal pilgrimages spring from this intimately fundamental one. In our koan of the Buddha ascending and then descending from the teaching seat, two pilgrimages meet. Meeting the Buddha, we deepen our faith in the reality of his teaching. Meeting ourselves, which is what happens in every koan, if we work at it, we gain the confidence to truly live this truth as our own daily life. Yet, for all that, the hook of the koan remains. What is Manjushri's, the Bodhisattva of Wisdom's, point when, like some loud carnival barker, he insists, as the Buddha just quietly sits there, that the Dharma of the king of the Dharma is like this? And then, once he announces it, proclaiming this great truth, why does the Buddha get up and leave? So, as we have a little time, I want to read you a poem that may or may not be related to all of this. It's a poem of Mary Oliver's, which I had forgotten about for many years, and it came to me this morning. So, it's called Dogfish. If you don't know this poem, I find it quite remarkable. She's quite an interesting poet. I hope you know some of her work. Her selected poems is a great collection and well worth having a copy on hand. Dogfish goes like this. Some kind of relaxed and beautiful thing kept flickering in with the tide in looking around, black as a fisherman's boot with a white belly. If you asked for a picture, I would have to draw a smile under the perfectly round eyes and above the chin, which was rough as 1,000 sharpened nails. And you know what a smile means, don't you? I wanted the past to go away. I wanted to leave it like another country. I wanted my life to close and open like a hinge, like a wing, like the part of the song where it falls down over the rocks, an explosion, a discovery. I wanted to hurry into the work of my life. I wanted to know whoever I was alive for a little while. It was evening, and no longer summer. 3 small fish, I don't know what they were, huddled in the highest ripples as it came swimming in again, effortless, the whole body one gesture, one black sleeve that could fit easily around the bodies of 3 small fish. Also, I wanted to be able to love, and we all know how that one goes, don't we? Slowly, the dogfish tore open the soft basins of water. You don't want to hear the story of my life. And anyway, I don't want to tell it. I want to listen to the enormous waterfalls of the sun. And anyway, it's the same old story. A few people just trying one way or another to survive. Mostly, I want to be kind. And nobody, of course, is kind or mean for a simple reason. And nobody gets out of it having to swim through the fires to stay in this world. And look, look, look! I think those little fish better wake up and dash themselves away from the hopeless future that is bulging toward them. And probably, if they don't waste time looking for an easier world, they can do it. I'm going to read that to you again. It's a pretty extraordinary poem, somehow very fitting. The Buddha sitting and leaving. Our world just as it is when we get up and leave this zendo. We're wasting time if we're looking for an easier world. So, dogfish. And you know, a dogfish is a kind of small, like sand shark. It's a kind of shark. Some kind of relaxed and beautiful thing kept flickering in with the tide and looking around, black as a fisherman's boot with a white belly. If you asked for a picture, I would have to draw a smile under the perfectly round eyes and above the chin, which was rough as 1,000 sharpened nails. And you know what a smile means, don't you? I wanted the past to go away. I wanted to leave it like another country. I wanted my life to close and open like a hinge, like a wing, like the part of the song where it falls down over the rocks, an explosion, a discovery. I wanted to hurry into the work of my life. I wanted to know, whoever I was alive for a little while. It was evening and no longer summer. 3 small fish, I don't know what they were, huddled in the highest ripples as it came swimming in again, effortless, the whole body one gesture, one black sleeve that could fit easily around the bodies of 3 small fish. Also, I wanted to be able to love, and we all know how that one goes, don't we? Slowly. The dogfish tore open the soft basins of water. You don't want to hear the story of my life. And anyway, I don't want to tell it. I want to listen to the enormous waterfalls of the sun. And anyway, it's the same old story of few people just trying one way or another to survive. Mostly, I want to be kind. And nobody, of course, is kind or mean for a simple reason. And nobody gets out of it having to swim through the fires to stay in this world. And look, 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 I think those little fish better wake up and dash themselves away from the hopeless future that is bulging toward them. And probably, if they don't waste time looking for an easier world, they can do it. They can do it. They can do it. We'll stop here and recite our great vows for all.